Apple Watch versus Garmin. I've been stuck in this debate for over a year. I've actually documented my first impressions, I've done comparisons, and somehow a year later, I found myself right back in the same spot. The difference now is that I've actually lived with both of these devices long enough to understand why this decision is actually so hard and why I think most videos don't really help people understand the debate. See, this is not gonna be a spec video. There are plenty of those already on YouTube, and this is about what actually matters most once the excitement wears off of getting a new watch. See, I just turned 40, and for the first time in my life, honestly, I'm taking my health and fitness really seriously. I only started running consistently maybe about 3 months ago, and in that short time, I'm now running roughly 25 to 40 miles a week. I placed third in my first ever 5K in my age group, and I ran my first sub 7-minute mile the other day, and I'm training for my first marathon this fall. So when I go all in on something, I really go all in. Ask anyone that knows me. And that includes getting obsessed with finding the right tools to help me get better. So first, before we go any further, we need to clear something up, a big, huge misconception. If you think the Apple Watch and Garmin are miles apart when it comes to fitness data, they're not. And honestly, anyone who says that clearly hasn't done real homework at all. GPS accuracy is excellent on both. Heart rate tracking is very reliable on both. Distance, pace, cadence, elevation, power, stride length, vertical oscillation, all those things are on both of these watches, and they do it exceptionally well. Where these watches differ is actually, in my opinion, not in the data, it's how they present and use the data. That's where this whole debate actually lives. So let's first talk about running. That's what I do the most, and I think a lot of Garmin users actually do that the most. From a pure data perspective, both these watches give you everything you need to train efficiently. So if we take a look here at exact data of a run that happened just last week, this is the Apple Watch, this is the Garmin, and this is the Whoop. So the Whoop is obviously a heart rate sensor. That's its primary purpose. So I use that as kind of the grand accuracy. If we take a look here, you can see that the workout time and the distance was a little bit longer on the Apple Watch, but I actually just stopped it a few seconds later. You can see that this was 52:45. This was 53:08. So I stopped the Garmin first, and then I stopped this 25 seconds later or something like that, because I kind of forgot that it's not as simple to stop, which is a credit to the Garmin. So you can see the average pace, 10:29 a mile on the Apple, and on the Garmin, 10:33 a mile, and on the Whoop, 10:34 a mile for that 5-mile distance. Average heart rate, the Whoop says 159 right here. The Garmin says 158 right here. And the Apple Watch says 162. Now, if we take a look at a little bit more analytics here, the average run cadence on the Garmin says 168 steps per minute, where you can see here that this says 167 steps per minute, so nearly identical, 168 and 167 on the Apple Watch. The heart rate, 162 to 158, 159, all about the exact same thing. Vertical oscillation, 9.1 centimeters. This vertical oscillation says 8.3. You can see basically all the stuff is essentially the same. Hey, sorry to jump in and quickly cut into this video. This is now Scott from the future, about 1 week after I filmed this whole other section that you've been watching. And I wanted to point out one interesting observation that I saw regarding heart rate, specifically on this Florida trip. It actually happened on 2 separate runs. Now, I don't know exactly what causes this, but in 2 separate runs, both of those runs, I was wearing the new Powerbeats Pro 2, and I also have AirPods that do the same thing, but they have the heart rate sensor built in. And when the heart rate sensor is working, it's supposed to also talk to your watch and your Apple products to kind of smooth out the heart rates between both devices to make them as accurate as possible, whatever. Long story short, I found it very interesting, and I even took a video of it, so I'll show you that in a second, but the heart rate accuracy of the Garmin on 2 separate runs was very off early on. In my very first run, it actually spiked up to almost 200 BPM, when it clearly wasn't even close to that. And you could see on the actual graph here that it was like very, very high very quickly, and then it came back down and acted all normal. But you can see clearly from the Whoop and from the Apple Watch that really wasn't the case at all, so it was like super inaccurate. Oddly enough, when that run got done, the average heart rate actually ended up being like spot on correct with the Whoop, which was weird. But clearly when I was looking at the watch and looking at my heart rate, it was totally off for like almost the first mile. Then in the second run, which was interesting, the Garmin was actually super low heart rate. You can see it represented in the graph as well, that it started actually very, very low, and then it kind of got on pace, and then it worked out for the rest of it. But the result of that run actually turned the Garmin into a 167 average heart rate, whereas the Apple was only 158, and the Whoop showed that Apple was significantly more accurate during that run. I don't know if it's just that it's taken a second to kind of warm up and get my heart rate to be accurate on the Garmin, or if it's just that because I also had the Apple Watch paired to the Powerbeats Pro and they have their own heart rate sensor, if it's just doing a better job of getting accuracy quicker. And I made sure both bands were incredibly tight to make sure that that wasn't an issue. They both were on like precision start, so I waited until both of them grabbed heart rate before starting the run. I did everything exactly the same on both of those, and the results were very different during the first mile, specifically when I was looking down at them. Just want to make sure I pointed that out. I spend most of my time looking at the data in Strava, as well as a lot of other runners. And when you complete a run on either device, it connects and sends that data to Strava. Once a run hits Strava, the data coming from the Apple Watch and Garmin are essentially identical. You can see this right here is the Apple Watch Ultra 3 in Strava. 5.06 miles, 53 minutes, 10:29 average pace. And on the Garmin side, you can see 5 miles exactly. I stopped that one at 5 miles. 10:33 pace, 26 feet of total elevation. Now you can see here what's kind of interesting. Really the only difference on Strava is that the Garmin automatically does this workout analysis where it actually breaks up lap 1 and shows what I was in: zone 2 endurance, zone 1 recovery, zone 1 recovery, zone 2 endurance, and it automatically does the splits for you, where if I look at that exact same run on the Apple Watch, it does not do that split. It just basically puts everything together. And then the only reason it even shows lap 2 here is because I pressed the wrong button to try to stop it. You can see that I thought I stopped it, but I just set a new lap. So yeah, a little different, still very close. All this stuff is primarily the same data. Where Garmin separates itself is not in what it records, but how it actively helps you train during the run. So let me give you an example. Pace Pro is a perfect example. With Pace Pro on the Garmin, you can say, I'm running a 5K and I want to hit a PR of 6:59 per mile, but I don't want to burn out early. You can tell it whether you want to run negative splits, even pacing throughout, positive splits. It'll actively pace you through the race in real time. Now you can even take it a step further and load an actual race course, and Garmin will factor in elevation. It will tell you when it's okay to push harder downhill, when to back off uphill so you don't blow up later. That's incredibly powerful if you seriously train. There's pacing on the Apple Watch, but the pacing is more just simply, I want to run a pace of this, or I want to run a length this long, and it will simply show you in real time how far ahead or how far behind the pace you are. It can also talk in your ears and tell you that as well, but it can't go into the detail internally to say, I want to run a negative split, or I want to run faster here or slower here. There are third-party apps for the Apple Watch that maybe can do things like that, but not natively in the watch itself. You can also even get super nerdy with the Garmin and be able to actually have a metronome where it sets a certain beats per minute and will vibrate on each step to be able to keep you in an exact pace that you want. Like, that's some crazy niche stuff. I get it, but that's where you're talking about the serious level of training. Garmin also gives you training effects, stamina tracking, and insights into what the specific run actually helped improve, whether it was aerobic, base, tempo, high intensity effort. Even when you lift weights, it'll automatically count reps and show you what muscle groups you were working based on those reps. I personally like that a lot because it gives context and not just numbers, but that's not for everyone. I get it. But elite athletes, people that really cared about that kind of stuff, you can see why they like it. To me, something as simple as the button-based interface actually matters a lot more than people think. When you're really sweaty, when you're running fast, when you're wearing gloves, when it's cold, whatever, buttons are simply just better to use. Like, I rarely ever have to touch the display. And when you're running, especially at a faster pace, it's not easy to have a touch screen that you have to worry about. It's nice being able to have tactical buttons that you can very easily press. The Fenix 8 specifically has 5 buttons on there, which make operating the entire watch just from buttons alone much easier. As someone who actually can't stand fingerprints, I really like that because I actually never touch the screen on this device. I literally operate the entire thing with buttons. And I personally like that. I also like the way the buttons look more than having none compared to the Apple Watch. I know that's just me. And then there's the flashlight. If you run early in the morning or after sunset, having an actual LED flashlight and a strobe you can turn on is genuinely useful. Apple's flashlight on this screen obviously is just really making the screen white and brighter. So it does a good job of illuminating like the ground below you if you're like looking for something in your house in the dark, but not like that. I like the fact that if it's dark outside, the strobe light automatically turns on when I'm running, and I am more visible to people that can see me while I'm running, but also it illuminates the path really well because it's a pretty strong LED that is useful for someone that might run on a regular basis in the dark. I get that a lot of these features might seem insignificant to the average person, and if you have an Apple Watch Ultra, you might say, well, not a big deal, I don't really need any of those. So I get it. I just want to point out the fact that there are a lot of little things inside the Garmin that are actually really useful for certain people, and you just don't get those anywhere else. But what about the battery life on the Apple Watch? It sucks. One of the most common things I hear from Garmin users is I could never switch to the Apple Watch because the battery life sucks. And that argument just doesn't hold up anymore, especially with the Apple Watch Ultra 3. Now, the Ultra 3 is rated for around 42 hours of battery life. But just for the sake of keeping this simple, let's go a generation back and round it down to 36 hours, where the previous Ultra 2 had. If you're someone who runs, trains, works out constantly, you are not going to be going 36 hours without showering or eating. And during those moments, showering, getting ready, sitting down for a meal, your watch is collecting zero meaningful data. If you take that 15 to 30 minutes in the shower and getting ready, or 30 minutes during a meal, lunch or dinner, and you throw the Apple Watch Ultra on the charger, you will literally never run out of battery. I know that because I've lived with it. The Ultra charges extremely fast, and that fast charging completely changes the conversation, in my opinion. See, Garmin users love to say my watch lasts 2 weeks, or my Solar one, for example, has a 28-day battery life. And my response is always the same. Who cares? I own a Garmin, and every time I take it off my wrist to shower, I put it on the charger. Because why wouldn't I? Even if we talk about longer efforts, like a marathon, a long trail run, or even an ultra marathon, the Apple Watch Ultra holds up far better than people assume. Even a really slow 6-hour marathon won't come close to draining the battery on this if you're using it just like you would use a Garmin. And also, we have to be fair in how we compare battery usage. People will say, well, if you're using GPS and streaming music and using cellular at the same time, the Apple Watch drains even faster. It won't even get you 42 hours. Sure, but that's not a fair comparison because you can't do any of that kind of stuff on the Garmin. If you compare GPS only tracking and your phone is nearby, like you're going to have if you have a Garmin most likely, which is how most serious training is done, the Apple Watch Ultra performs extremely well. So yes, Garmin absolutely wins on raw battery longevity. It's not even close. 28 days compared to 42 hours, there's no debate. But in real world usage, battery life is not a reason you should avoid the Apple Watch Ultra. It's just, in my opinion, not an issue. Now, there is one reason that Garmin still might make the most sense for some people, and I'll get to that in a second. But first, we need to talk about health and safety. This part matters to a lot of people. Apple has clearly invested heavily into health detection. Fall detection, irregular heart rhythm alerts, AFib detection. There are real stories of the Apple Watch actually saving people's lives, and I think that's incredible. Studies have shown Apple Watch to be slightly more accurate in terms of certain health-related measurements, including sleep stages, heart rhythm detection. Garmin does a really good job with this as well, but Apple's clearly leaning hard into clinical health monitoring. Sleep tracking is strong on both. Some studies even give Apple a slight edge. Personally, I don't love sleeping with a watch, which is why I actually use a bicep band Whoop, and I have that on all the time. But if sleep tracking matters to you, both watches are very capable and they do a great job. But in terms of safety and connectivity, Apple has a clear advantage here. The Apple Watch Ultra has full 5G connectivity with number sharing, meaning calls and texts work seamlessly without your phone. It also has satellite connectivity, allowing you to send messages even when you're off the grid entirely for free, but from your actual phone number. So you can send a message to someone you need to, not just emergency systems. Garmin's newer watches do offer LTE, but it's like a different use case. It relies on Garmin Messenger, it uses a separate number. It's really not designed to replace your phone. It's great for emergency communication, but it's not the same experience as Apple. It's not even close. So if battery life doesn't matter, and the Apple Watch can do everything the Garmin does basically, plus be the best smartwatch you can buy, the question is, who would ever buy a Garmin? And the answer is a lot of people. And here's why. See, the part I think no one talks about is identity. This is the most important part of the decision, whether people want to admit it or even know it or not. See, Garmin feels like a watch that exists for one purpose and one purpose only, to make you move. Apple Watch feels like a phone on your wrist that also happens to track fitness extremely well. But it's also the watch that everybody wears, including people who do not care at all about fitness. When I put on the Garmin in the morning, I genuinely feel more motivated to train. It actually reminds me of who I'm trying to become. When I put on the Apple Watch, I think about convenience, communication, staying connected, things that are also important, but they're very different. Neither is wrong, but they whisper very different things to you. See, it's identity. And whether we admit it or not, that matters. And it's actually, in my opinion, not a bad thing. To some people, it matters because they want others to know it as well. And to some people like me, it actually just helps remind me what I'm trying to become. You see, not a single person buys a Garmin watch because they want the best smartwatch, because it's not. They buy a Garmin because they want to be the best and they believe Garmin helps them get there. Go to a local race and you'll see this for yourself. Watch the winners of the New York City Marathon, the Chicago Marathon, the Austin Marathon, any large marathon anywhere in the world. I can almost guarantee you that the winners of these races will be wearing a Garmin. Why is that? The epic sub 3 hour or even 2 hour marathon they just ran would have easily been captured with the Apple Watch with the same level of accuracy, and even the Apple Watch SE would have had no problem from a battery life. But still, they choose Garmin. You see, when I talk about identity, I'm not saying you can't be a serious runner or elite athlete wearing an Apple Watch. You absolutely can, and there are plenty of those people. The Apple Watch is one of the most impressive pieces of technology ever put on a wrist. What I'm saying is more observational than judgmental. When you look around at races, group runs, serious training environments, it's just interesting how many people still choose Garmin, even though the Apple Watch can technically do almost everything they need, and in most cases, actually better than Garmin. That tells me it's not about capability, it's about what the watch represents to the person wearing it. And that identity, whether logical or not, clearly matters. So let me tell you now what I love about each watch and why I specifically landed on the exact model that I chose. You see, Garmin has a lot of different watches, different sizes, different models, different bands, etc. Apple basically has 3 models, an SE, a Series 11, and the Apple Watch Ultra. They have a few size differences. Garmin has a ton of models and sizes. So after testing multiple sizes and models, I actually landed on the 47mm Fenix 8 Solar Edition. I'd actually guess this is probably the least popular version Garmin sells because it's a little different and a little bit more niche, but for me, it ended up being the perfect fit. The first and most important thing is simply how the watch looks. Now, I know this is subjective, but I think the Fenix 8 just looks incredible. With the right band, it genuinely reminds me of an analog watch that I already love wearing. It wears like a real watch, it looks like a real watch, but still gives me some serious fitness tracking and smart notifications when I want them. And as someone who cares about watches, this actually matters a lot to me. If I like how a watch looks, I want to wear it more. And if I want to wear it more and it motivates me to train more, that's a huge win for me that cannot be overlooked. Now, I specifically chose the Solar Edition, and the biggest reason for that is the display. This specific version uses a memory and pixel display, not an AMOLED screen like most other Garmin's and basically every other smartwatch. And that's intentional. See, one of my biggest pet peeves with smartwatches is how they behave visually. See, when most smartwatches are facing away from you, they look one way. And then when you turn your wrist, the screen lights up, colors pop, and suddenly you're staring at a tiny computer on your wrist. And every time that happens, I'm reminded that I'm wearing a little computer and not a watch. And I hate that. The MIP display on the Fenix 8 solves that for me because it's always on, it always looks the same, and it doesn't change depending on whether it's facing me or you. It generally looks like a watch at all times. In bright daylight, it's incredibly to read and honestly almost looks fake because of how natural it appears. And at night or in dark environments, the backlight turns on automatically, but even then it doesn't look like a glowing screen. It still feels like a watch. And one thing I grew to love about my G-Shocks is that they were solar powered, so they basically make you never think about charging them. The Fenix 8 obviously still needs to be charged occasionally, but the fact that the battery anxiety simply doesn't exist is a nice thing. Now, because I came from a period of not wearing an Apple Watch at all, the smart features Garmin doesn't have aren't a big deal to me. When I was wearing nothing but G-Shocks or real watches, I had zero notifications. So the only thing I ever truly missed was calendar alerts, not text or calls. So having a watch that looks and feels like a normal watch, but simultaneously is an incredible fitness tracker and still gives me the important notifications I actually care about, feels like a really nice middle ground. Now, I'll say this plainly. I wish Apple made a round watch that looked more like this. I've just never loved the way Apple Watches look compared to the Fenix line, and that alone pushes me personally heavily toward Garmin, and then you factor in those other things. My issue with the Apple Watch isn't functionality, it's actually identity and motivation. Everyone has one. They're just boring to me and they don't motivate me to do anything. That might be a me problem, and I get that, and that's fine, but it's still real. If you want the best all-around smartwatch on the planet, nothing comes close to Apple Watch. For me though, the Fenix feels more like a watch that aligns better with who I want to be. So let's actually answer the question people are probably asking at this point. What's the better watch for me? I think the answer depends entirely on where you are in your fitness or running journey. If you're a brand new runner or just getting started with fitness in general, I'll keep this simple. If you already have an Apple Watch, just use it. Seriously, any relatively recent Apple Watch is more than good enough to get you moving, track your runs, and build consistency, and that's the most important part. You do not need to buy anything new to start running if you have a device already. If you don't have an Apple Watch yet and you want the easiest possible entry point, I think the Apple Watch SE is a fantastic place to start if you are currently also an iPhone user. It's affordable, simple, it gives you everything you need to start. As you run more, you'll naturally start to notice maybe what features you wish it had, and you might think about upgrading to a different Apple Watch or maybe even a Garmin, but that's a great problem to have because it means you're active. If you're drawn to Garmin early on because of the identity, the simplicity, or this is the training tool mindset, then Garmin has some great beginner options too. The Forerunner 55 and Forerunner 165 are excellent starting points. They have strong GPS, great battery life, and everything you need for fitness without being overwhelming at all. Really, the only time I'd suggest someone replaces a basic Apple Watch early on is if they don't enjoy wearing it and they want a watch that kind of reinforces that commitment to fitness and running. But if you already like your Apple Watch, just stick with it. You're fine. Now, if you're someone who's been running for a bit and you're starting to feel limitations with your current Apple Watch, This is where the decision to me gets a little bit more interesting. If you're on an older Apple Watch, upgrading to the Series 11 is a totally valid move. It's fast, it's accurate, has more than enough battery life for most runners. If you want something a little bit more rugged with better battery life, better outdoor performance, of course, the Ultra 3 is a fantastic upgrade, a fantastic watch as well. It might not work for you stylistically, might feel too big for you, but it's something to at least try on. Personally, if you go the Apple route at this stage, I'd recommend the cellular option if you don't mind the monthly fee. Once you have cellular, it's really hard to give up the freedom of leaving your phone behind. Now, if you're looking at Garmin in this same category, the Forerunner 570 and 970 are excellent choices. They sit right in about the same general price range of the Apple Watch Series 11, and they give you deeper training tools. They give you that coaching I talked about and really long battery life. And this is where Garmin really starts to shine if you care about the structure and progression of your fitness. And finally, for the more serious or elite runner, honestly, you probably don't need my advice. You likely already have and know what you prefer, and most likely there's a good chance you're actually already wearing a Garmin because of some of these reasons. But I will say this, if you're an experienced runner who's tempted by the convenience and everyday usability of an Apple Watch, just know the Ultra 3 is more than capable of handling your training. It's incredibly accurate, super reliable, and it's absolutely strong enough for serious running. I think the main reason an elite runner wouldn't be happy switching is if they rely heavily on Garmin's built-in coaching, Pace Pro, or any of the tools I talked about, and they've already used those. If you're not using those features though, the Apple Watch can absolutely handle anything you throw at it with extreme accuracy. So what's that mean for me? Right now, I feel like the Garmin wins. Not because it does more, but because it says less. It doesn't try to be my phone. It doesn't try to entertain me. It just quietly pushes me to be better. Every time I wear the Garmin, there are things I miss about the Apple Watch. But I'm okay with that trade-off if it pushes me closer to who I want to become and further from who I used to be. And to me, that's important. This was a long video. Thanks for watching.